Bad morning, everyone. Oh man, it was almost a bad morning again because I fucking my alarm went off during the part of the dream where it was starting to get absurd and funny and also terrible because I have fucking night terrors. So it's always nice when they start to get a little bit funny, even if they're still awful. Um, but anyway, it is the only synchronous day that we will have this year. It is 8/8/18. Um, tomorrow or next year it'll be 9/9/19 that will be the synchronous day. So celebrate today for the numerical quality that the government is probably fucking with you with because Freemasons are in charge of part of it, if not all of it, and they like numerology. Um, some housekeeping to get out of the way. We got this is sponsored by Brave. Brave is the ad resistant, track resistant browser experience that you can use to browse the web, knowing that you're supporting creators without also supporting the ad agency middlemans that are censoring the internet. It's also brought to you by the Cash App, which is a Federal Reserve note and Bitcoin wallet that comes with a Visa card. It's also brought to you by Liberty Mugs, mugs that you can use to piss off your coworkers right before the government mind controls you to shoot up the workplace. This is going to start off with an episode specifically about that topic. So it's interesting that this topic came up at around this time because mind control is one of the things that the government has been working on for a really long time. I'd like everybody who watches this show to check out a new documentary that's come out by True Stream Media. You have to rent it if you can't find a copy somewhere, but I would definitely rent it because supporting those people is a fantastic choice. Those people are fantastic people who are really good at finding the truth. They're Truth Stream Media, Aaron and Melissa Dykes. Please go support them as well. That is The Minds of Men, and it's a documentary on U.S. government's mind control experiments. But with that being said, please check out that, and let's hear about this story of government mind control by remote control.
Yeah, so granted, this is a few months old, if I'm honest, but
Well, it bears
I saw
repeating.
it bears repeating. So I'm going to start with where I got it from originally, which was actually out of Popular Mechanics, which I consider to be a fairly reputable source. Back in April by David Grossman, government accidentally releases documents on psychoelectric weapons. They were mistakenly sent to a journalist. Uh, the government has all kinds of secrets, but only a true conspiracy theorist might suspect that, quote, psychoelectric weapons are one of them. So it's odd that Muckrock, a news organization that specializes in filing Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests with state and federal government bodies, received mysterious documents about mind control seemingly by accident. Journalist Curtis Waltman was writing to the Washington State Fusion Center, WSFC, a joint operation between Washington state law enforcement and federal government to request information about Antifa and white supremacist groups. He got responses to the questions he asked, but also a file titled EM Effects on Human Body.zip. Inside were documents like this, and there's basically a picture of a person with all sorts of arrows pointing to various parts of the body with various pieces of information associated to it. So let's see what we've got here. For the head, forced memory blanking and induced erroneous actions. Induced changes to hearing, both apparent direction and volume, sometimes even content. Reading and broadcasting thoughts. Controlled dreams. Forced waking visions, some synced with body motion. Microwave hearing, which apparently the first unclassified successful transmission of the human voice directly into the skull of a living person was performed by Dr. Joseph C. Sharp of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in 1974 by transforming I'm trying to read this. I think it says a hypno a hypnotist's voice using the lowest silent sound or Smirnoff scramble methods. Used in the Gulf War, it is possible to hypnotize a target without the target being aware from hiding, leaving zero trace evidence. You can make people think they have transparent eyelids, artificial tinnitus, forced movement of jaw and clacking of teeth, sudden and violent itching inside the eyelids, which is a particularly twisted form of torture, forced manipulation of the airways, including externally controlled forced speech, wildly racing heart without cause, remotely induced violent no rash itching, with preference for hard-to-reach areas, often during delicate or messy work. Forced nudging of arm during delicate or messy work, causing injury or spills. Special attention to the genital area for itching, forced orgasms, and intense pain. Intense pain or hot needles pushed deep into flesh sensations. To be quite frank, it's disturbing just how many different forms of effect you can have. General effects include sudden overheating, all body pain, forced caffeine field, sleep prevention, forced drop in your tracks sleep inducement, irresistible go here, go there commands, microwave burns, and electric shocks. There was also documents describing how mass and individual people could be remotely controlled via the mobile phone network, how people could have their minds basically mapped via a number of bioelectric signal mappings, the various human brave wave frequencies that exist from the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, and mu waves. It's a fairly comprehensive set of little what look like mini PowerPoint slides that were done in the 70s. And they're quite extensive, but they don't look like they have any official certification behind them from the state itself. It just seems odd that the government would release them as part of a FOIA. Anyway, at least some of the images appear to be part of an article in Nexus magazine describing a 1992 lawsuit brought by one John St. Sinclair Akewi against the NSA. Akewi claimed that the NSA had, quote, the ability to assassinate U.S. citizens covertly or run covert psychological control operations to cause subjects to be diagnosed with ill mental health, and was documenting their alleged methods. Nexus was and still is an Australian magazine focused on the unexplained, conspiracy theories, alternative medicine, and the like. It covered Akewi's case in 1996, but was unable to get Akewi to discuss it further. I tried ringing Mr. Akewi to find out what was the outcome, if any, of his court case. He firmly, but kindly, told me he could not speak about anything to do with the case over the phone and hung up, reads the editor's note at the end of the article. The federal government had absolutely experimented with mind control in a variety of methods, but the documents here do not appear to be official. Waltman had no idea why these documents were included in his request and isn't sure why the government is even holding them. The WSC did not respond to requests for more information, and this source was from Muckrock. Now, it's worth mentioning a little bit from that source as well, because it's sort of one of those websites that loves to see a conspiracy come out, but at the same time does seem confused as hell as to why it got these documents. So I'm happy to continue on with that, but it's probably worth getting your thoughts on this so far, mate.
Well, I mean, I've known about this stuff for an extensive period, like for the most part. I didn't know about the body organ targeting thing, but I knew about the psychoacoustic like thought projection, and I knew about the distortion of thought centers by electromagnetics and by fucking microwaves as well, where you can sort of bake a part of the person's brain inside their brain, and it'll cause psychosis and a bunch of other shit. But like, so I know that they're not wrong about the worst parts of this. The only thing that's new to me is fucking the itching thing and things like that, like the hard to reach, like stabbing sensations or whatever, pokey sensations.
Mm.
That's the only thing that's new to me. And the fact that they can control your mind is much worse. They would have hidden that more than they would hide the fact that they could cause you to itch. Um, which, by the way, suddenly I'm itching, but the the
That
whole
could be
like
just psychosomatic.
well, I was joking. The so the whole like idea of MK Ultra mind control kind of experimentation, uh, we don't have remotely the breadth of like any of this information, and we certainly don't have a grasp on what we do have yet. But like this has been pretty well known for a while. I just found out about it because maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I read a report, and this might be the same for you, but I read a report that said something similar, and it was posted by like mainstream sites. It wasn't posted by Muckrock. And the fact that Popular Mechanics is posting this also means that they buy what Muckrock was selling. Now,
Mm.
I'm a Gamergate supporter. Like, I don't think the press are always fantastic, and I think that that a lot of the time they'll go with a story that has good headlines because they're desperate for clicks. But you know, it's sort of like a cop giving you a speeding ticket even though you weren't going fast enough to be dangerous. You know, they want to get that article quota. Um,
Mm.
but I don't see that here. I've seen this like countless times from other sources and specifically covered in detail how they could do it. And it's believable. I've looked at the
Mm.
diagrams of a lot of these weapons, and a lot of these weapons are really, really, really compact and easy to hide somewhere. So it's like it's something that I've already known has been happening anyway. So there's no way that this person is wrong, except if the government has created this as a way to distract from other like legitimate conspiracies, which is always a possibility. There's always a possibility that they've leaked like secret mind control methods and all these terrible things they can do when they can't actually do them. Um, because they want to intimidate the American public. That's always
Mm.
in the back of my mind, like, whoops, we leaked this. Like, I was mocking in chat the other day how many, quote, mistakes they made. They decoded purple. They could have stopped Pearl Harbor. They lied about the Lusitania. They lied about arming, funding, and training Mujahideen, and suddenly there's Al Qaeda and ISIS. There's, and they had the intel on 9/11, the planes coming, and they didn't share it between agencies. Whoops. Uh, and they released this info. Whoops. So there's always the possibility that this is a psyop in and of itself, and that they wouldn't even need to control the individual's mind if the individual thought their mind was being controlled and were convinced enough to be psychotic. But it seems valid the ways that they could do it, especially the psychoacoustics, which are the easiest thing to do. All you have to do is make your sound waves project out in front of what you're doing, where the transmitter is, and far enough out in front with enough interference in between that you can use essentially, if I remember the term correctly, cymatic frequencies to vibrate surfaces in their skull enough that they think they're hearing a voice. And the voices told me to has been an excuse for a really long time. That guy
Mm.
who shot up that base in Texas, I think the base was Fort Hood, he had carved into his gun, "This is my elf weapon," because he believed he was being controlled by an elf weapon. And
Mm.
you laugh, but I believe that's a possibility.
Well,
I
given
believe
the
that there's a
fact,
possibility that he was being targeted by an elf weapon because he knew too much, and they got him to make a crazy out of himself so that they could kill him. And it was essentially manufactured suicide by cop, only in this case it was suicide by troop.
this is the thing, though. One of the it's funny you mention elf weapons because There's it's probably just worth me reading it direct from Muckrock, to be honest. Because one of the documents that was released was specifically on elf brain stimulation. And that's electronic low frequency, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what they'll do is they'll send a very low frequency signal out via, I'm assuming, radio waves of some description. Because
Oh, and
again,
but
all waves of energy are pretty much
yeah.
fairly straightforward, the same.
And by the way, for those of you who don't know, low frequency does not mean that it's low power. It just means that the frequency with which the waves hit the target is not as high. So
Yeah.
basically, what
It's,
that means is that if you picture like a waveform, this is like longer waves. It's not the really little waves that bounce around. It's like longer waves. And if you bounce those longer waves over a target, it's less detectable, but still has an effect. It's not like
yeah.
because it's low frequency, it doesn't have an effect. And in fact, if you have the right frequency, you can have better effect on a surface. So if they found out the frequency for neuronal like bridges and shit, then they could possibly be more effective with a lower frequency weapon anyway. So it's an interesting concept, but go ahead. I just thought I'd explain that to people.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, it's worth explaining. Low frequency just means that, as you said, there are fewer peaks and troughs in the actual wave, rather than it being a lot of peaks and troughs with lots of activity and very low distance. Low frequency can go a lot further as well because it's, again, a longer wave to play with. It doesn't need to sustain the energy for as long, but you can deal with things like motor impulse coordination, bypassing the ears with sound, bypassing the eyes with images, bypassing the sense of touch and making you think you're being touched by a phantom, or putting thoughts into your brain. These are things that ELF is supposed to be able to do. Now, one of the reasons I think Popular Mechanics reported Muckrock so impartially is they did make a caveat. Now, to be clear, the presence of these records, which were not created by the Fusion Center and are not government documents, should not be seen as evidence that DHS possesses these devices or that even such devices actually exist, which is kind of unfortunate because microwave hearing is a pretty cool line of techno babble to say out loud. You know, it's even cooler? Remote brain mapping. It's insanely cool to say. Go ahead, say it. Remote brain mapping. It's just one of those sorts of things that if it is possible, wow. But they're obviously, Muckrock is skeptical, but it is interesting that these released as part of an FOIA request on Antifa and white supremacist groups, because it almost has an implication there. And why don't I think it's worth now? You mentioned that shooter in Texas. Well, there's another shooter today who recently came out with some, or not today, actually Monday, that came out with a taped confession from the cops. Good old Nicholas Cruz from Parkland, Florida High School shooting.
Yeah, yeah, you can get into that. I'm talking to somebody in the Bad Morning server, which, by the way, everybody who wants to check that out, we have a server for Bad Morning News on Discord now, and you can post everything there if you want.
So yeah, there's from USA Today, because I just decided I tried to pull it from a couple of sites and GDPR screwed me over. USA Today allowed me to access it. So this is by Alexi C. Cardona and Mike James, August 6th. Parkland school shooting, suspect heard voices to, quote, burn, kill, destroy, confession says. Naples, Florida. The teenager accused of killing 17 people at Parkland, Florida High School in February said in a taped confession that he heard, quote, voices in his head and wanted someone to, quote, just kill me, according to a transcript released Monday. Nicholas Cruz, 19, told a detective that the voices in his head began after his father died and worsened after his mother died of pneumonia just months before the rampage. Cruz said a voice at one point told him to burn, kill, destroy. Cruz also told police during the interview, conducted right after his arrest for spraying bullets into his classmates at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on Valentine's Day, that the voices told him to buy a gun. The
By the
transcript
way,
was
that's the real moral of this story is that you need to shorten our high school names.
yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful to say that one. Anyway, the transcript was released by the state attorney's office in Broward County on Monday, and a video of portions of the confession will be released Tuesday. At one point, the detective doing the interview, John Curico, asked Cruz if he wanted a drink of cold water. Cruz replied, "I don't deserve it." Curico left the room briefly to get him a cup of water anyway. That's when Cruz, alone in the room, remarked that he wished he could be killed. Cruz continued to say on the recording that he deserved to die. "I want to die," Cruz said during the recording. "At the end, you're nothing but a worthless shit dude. You deserve to die because you're fucking worthless and you're fucking unintelligible, everyone. I want to die." Details of the shooting are blacked out, but the transcript otherwise deals with the death of Cruz's parents, his penchant for killing animals, his former girlfriend, his brother, guns, suicide attempts, and especially the voice. Cruz said hearing the voice the morning of the shooting, said he heard the voice the morning of the shooting, according to the confession transcript. Much of the 217-page confession is redacted. According to Florida law, any information revealing, quote, the substance of a confession is exempt from public disclosure until the case is resolved. Broward County Judge Les Monk ruled the non-confession portions of Cruz's post-shooting statements could be made public, according to the Associated Press. Cruz's attorney did not want the document disclosed, saying it would hinder his right to a fair trial, the AP reported. The context of the transcript is expansive. Cruz discusses his brother, his ex-girlfriend, being adopted, previous drug use, and incidents in which he killed animals. Cruz mostly talked about the voice in his head. Cruz told the detective about his suicide attempts. He said after his mom died, he tried to kill himself by swallowing over-the-counter pain medication, and another time he tried to poison himself with alcohol. The transcript shows Cruz spoke softly at times, and the detective had trouble hearing and asked him to speak up multiple times. Cruz asked the detective to call a psychologist. When the detective asked him what he wanted to talk to a psychologist about, Cruz said, "To find out what's wrong with me." Cruz told the detective he bought his first gun at 18 and collected 3 shotguns, an AR-15, a handgun, and an AK-47. His mother had taken him to buy some of the guns, the transcript states. The detective asked him whether his mom ever asked why he was buying so many guns. Cruz said he told her they were for his protection because they looked, quote, cool. He also said the voice wanted him to buy guns. Cruz told the detective he bought guns to protect himself from the voice and also kept the guns locked up to keep the voice from getting to them. Cruz estimated he spent about $4,000 on firearms and ammunition. Cruz told the detectives multiple times he was lonely. He had no friends and scared girls away, Cruz said. The voice in his head kept him from being lonely. Curico asked him if the voice was like an imaginary friend. Almost yes, Cruz said. The detective asked him why he wanted to be friends with somebody who tells him to do bad things. To have somebody, Cruz said. The detective asked Cruz whether the voice told him to buy the AR-15 he's accused of using in the shooting. Cruz said yes. I don't really believe there is a voice, to be honest with you, Curico told Cruz. Cruz insists there is a voice. The detective doubles down on Cruz about there not being a voice toward the end of the interrogation. Curico insisted Cruz simply liked guns, and that's why he amassed them. The detective asked Cruz why he never tried to stop the, quote, demon and the voice. Curico told Cruz he could have sought help with a psychologist, seen a priest, or told his mom while she was still alive. The suspected gunman could have asked for medication or smoked marijuana, which Cruz had already done and said it helped quiet the voice, Curico said during the interrogation. Cruz had multiple ways to stop the demon in his head, according to Curico. At that point, Cruz appeared to become agitated. He asked Curico if he could have some time to think about the demon and why he hadn't tried to stop them. I think you like the demon, Curico told Cruz. I don't like the demon. I don't like the demon. I don't like. He says it basically 4 times. Eventually, Cruz asked for an attorney and repeated 4 times, I'm scared. Why wouldn't he protect me? Cruz asked. Kiriko said he didn't know, walked out of the room and told Cruz to yell if he needed anything. When Kiriko left, Cruz just consistently repeated, "Why didn't he kill me?" Kiriko returned and handcuffed Cruz's hands behind his back. So, yeah. If nothing else, this is pretty much screaming the mind of a broken man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not condoning. Don't think that I am, but I can't help but feel for somebody this shattered. He's lost his family. He has nobody. And the only thing he has is the voices in his head. And if the conspiracies on the ELF weapons are to be believed, and if they are actually true, there is every logical reason to believe, what shall we say, how to do it deep state style is possible. They could have targeted this poor boy.
And let's be very specific. This article just came out on Activist Post. The article's titled "Goodbye Columbus, Ohio. Now that you're a smart city, everyone and every living thing is being exposed to much more harmful radiation and electrosmog," by B.N. Frank. According to a recent article about Columbus, Ohio becoming a smart city, quote, "All the grant money in the world won't help it prepare for the future if the city doesn't also win over public opinion. Was the public aware that becoming a smart city required them to be exposed 24/7 to radiation from harmful 4G and 5G small cell towers and related wireless infrastructure and products such as sensors, quote, smart meters and electric autonomous vehicles and more?" Quote, "Columbus won the award for its plan to remake its transportation systems with smart sensors and electric and autonomous vehicles and extend this infrastructure to reach residents of oft-neglected low-income communities with commercial corridors and health services. All sources of wireless radiation are a form of electrical pollution, otherwise known as electrosmog. Decades of research has already proven exposure is unpleasant in a variety of horrible ways, in addition to cancer risk. 5G exposure symptoms are particularly bad, and in June 2018, Dr. Naomi Wolf started posting on social media about how 5G was affecting New Yorkers and their pets. It's very sad. This is why people all over the US and the world are trying to stop this insanity. 24/7 surveillance for gathering the personal data of Columbus residents is also part of the smart city deal. Cities across the globe are installing technology to gather data in the hopes of saving money, quote, becoming cleaner, reducing traffic, and improving urban life. Residents are also being forced to take awful utility smart meters. Quote, to support the city's plans, American Electric Power, Ohio's largest utility, plan to spend $200 million to update the power grid and put smart meters in hundreds of thousands of homes. Quote, smart meters expose residents and their pets to harmful radiation and electromagnetic fields. Smart meters also are prone to fires, explosions, and measurement errors. They can cause appliances to malfunction and break. They also violate the right to privacy. People everywhere hate smart meters and are trying to keep them off their homes and out of their communities for all of these reasons. Of course, automated vehicles have caused many accidents already, including one fatality so far. They also take jobs from people in the transportation industry. Yet, meanwhile, Ohio State University and Honda have partnered to build a nearby autonomous vehicle testing facility. The Transportation Research Center's $45 million smart center broke ground this summer on what will be a 540-acre facility. Here's some more details on how residents are losing their rights to privacy. Quote, RFID chips and license plates or window stickers could wirelessly signal whether or not cars were legally parked in particular residential areas and assist in automatic fare collection. More impressive, vehicles outfitted with onboard units that detect RFID signals could be warned about children nearby and reduce visibility situations at night or during a storm. Student ID cards, for example, with RFID tags could easily be distributed to implement such a system, which would then alert drivers as they approach, say, a school zone. In order to accomplish these larger goals, the city has embarked on creating a new Smart Columbus operating system, SCOS. Columbus's chief innovation officer, Michael Stevens, has described the critical software program as the backbone of the municipality's project portfolio. Essentially, the SCOS is a smart city data management platform that will allow the city to collect data from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors and use that info to affect outcomes like children's health care and access to healthy food. Think Christopher Columbus would have been happy to stumble on this new world? And that's the end of the article. And it has also, by the way, links at the bottom of that article to, it says like Center for Safer Wireless, Center for Electrosmog Prevention, Citizens for Safe Technology, Clear Light Ventures, Dr. Sam Millam, Electric Sense, EMF Safety Network, Environmental Health Trust, Generation Zapped, Empower Movement, National Association for Children and Safe Technology, Parents for Safe Technology, Safer EMR, Scientists for Wired Tech, StopSmartMeters.org, we are the evidence, and what is 5G.info. So if anybody wants to check out any of those organizations, you can.
Now, I'm a technophile, so I don't have like an inherent fear of new technology. I don't straightforward immediately think it's going to be used to harm us. I assume that
and beyond, and like I just wanted to clarify, like I am a conspiracy theorist, but I don't automatically assume that this like practically necessarily is being built to like control people or do any of the stuff we were just talking about. It's just interesting that the electromagnetic exposure is being increased right after this this sort of thing is being publicly exposed. So go ahead though.
But yeah, I mean there are risks with regards to any kind of technology, particularly something that involves frequencies of radiation, which all forms of technology will emit in some way, shape, or form. Some of it is classified as safe, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is 100% non-lethal to somebody. There's always an exposure risk. There's always something that could go wrong that we're not aware of, because there is always the unknown unknowns that, as Rumsfeld called them. But I'll be honest, a lot of people make fun of him for those four concepts, the known and the unknown, being combined, but it is a very valid idea that you can have known knowns, unknown knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. Those are all conceptually true. It's like, if this is possible, this is what we would do. That's an unknown known. We have a response to it, but we don't know if it could even happen. But a known unknown is when you know something exists, but you don't know how to resolve it. And an unknown unknown you can't plan for, because you don't know what it is, and you also don't know how to fix it.
Right. It's the reason like Lovecraftian bullshit made people in those fictions go insane.
Because they all had to deal with the unknown unknown. And
they were confronted with the reality that they had no control over.
Yeah, and no way of actually mitigating in any way, shape, or form. It's one of those, everybody has to plan for those kinds of things. And those kinds of things, if you don't know they exist, or even could exist, then you assume they don't. So when you're affected by them, you don't know how to deal with them. Whereas if you assume it's some entity or some process trying to affect you, you can try and manage it in some way, shape, or form. There are skills that you can learn, and a lot of them require you to be a critical thinker, because if you can't think critically, it's much easier to manipulate you as a person. Yeah. If you can't take the time to think through those things, it becomes so easy to just make you believe whatever you want.
Speaking of not thinking, we've got somebody who downvoted this video and then unsubscribed. So, and they didn't, and like the reason I'm phrasing it that way is they didn't even tell us in chat anything we were getting wrong. So congratulations to that person for being an unthinking drone. Anyway, fucking.
Oh, well.
Yeah, well, you know, because we don't need that sort of person We need the sort of person who's going to be a critical enough thinker to at least call us on whatever they think is wrong. You know, because
Yeah.
that way we might be able to get something right. If you ever don't like something that we're saying and have a good reason for it, tell us what that reason is. We have a huge amount of respect for somebody who's willing to call us on our bullshit if we do have any. But as far as I'm aware, nothing we just said was wrong. And the video now has a 1/3 downvote percentage. So that's fairly fucked. But whatever, it's gonna happen.
Shit like that happens, mate. You'll get people who just don't want to know and they don't want to hear it. And when they don't want to hear something, they want to plug their ears and they can't. So they unsubscribe, downvote, basically do everything they can to make sure they never see this kind of thing again. They're trying to use the algorithm to benefit themselves. And that's their choice. And like you said, more power to them because we need people who are willing to question us. I'm very happy to have my logic critiqued and my views criticized, but I expect them to be criticized logically. I don't expect somebody to just come out and throw obscenities at me or slander me online. I expect them to back it up with either evidence, so I have data to review, or something that is compelling as an argument.
Yeah. Well, but we have a chat. We have actually 2 chats right now, and we'll have multiple chats in the future. Because this is gonna be streamed to multiple platforms in the future. So we have the capability for people to reach out if they've got something that they want to fucking like talk to us about. But this person, we have 0 messages in the chat so far. So
Oh well,
yeah,
no
oh
big
well.
deal.
Anyway, so on this sort of level, do you have any article like any more articles than the ones that you posted already? Because there's something that I wanted to cover in a sort of breaking news fashion that we could have covered yesterday. So go ahead if you do.
I don't at the moment, so feel free to cover any breaking news. I'll quickly see if there are any more articles on this, though, while you do that.
Okay, well, yesterday, Anarchy Ball, the Twitter account, got suspended and is now all the way off Twitter. And the last things that they remember doing were posting a brain bug image GIF thing from Starship Troopers. I think maybe in response to somebody. So there's that part of it. But he was also talking about fucking Alex Jones quite a bit, talking about social media censorship, and then suddenly he's off of Twitter. And I just thought that was interesting, given the thing that we were discussing yesterday, that suddenly Anarchy Ball, who's been on Twitter for a very long time and constantly been on the right side of reports, fucking was on the right side of reports for his entire time until he started to criticize social media censorship. And it wouldn't surprise me if that had something to do with it. If he was being censored actively, and his account's gone now. And I'm going to be seeing if I can reach out to him to get an interview like I did for Twitter's side. Twitter's side was Safe Space Assassin on Twitter. And one of the things she took to doing before she got suspended, she's reinstated now, is exposing pedophiles on Twitter and showing, and her last mistake was showing a link to Jack in a direct message that talked about pedophilia, which slides nicely into my next story. But beyond that, I just thought I'd make people aware. Additionally, that combined with the fact that Scott Horton, Pete Van Buren, and Daniel McAdams were all banned or suppressed in the same days for criticizing a journalist. The whole thing is starting to take a very, very sharp tone here. And I
Yeah.
get it, they're a private corporation, but I made that Yu-Gi-Oh card yesterday, so just play it as much as you want. I don't give a shit, but only if you get it in your hand. You can't just pull that out of the deck. Um,
I've
so
got a couple more, by the way, mate.
yeah, go for it. So after you're done with that, I've got something about police corruption. So go ahead.
Sounds good. So, to continue with the mind control theme for today, this from a few weeks ago, but still relevant. Pentagon wants to bring mind control tech to troops. The Defense Department research arm is working on a project that connects human operators' brains to the systems they're controlling, and vice versa. The idea of human controlling machines with their minds has spun off sci-fi blockbusters like Pacific Rim and entire subgenres of foreign films. But while today skyscraper-sized fighting robots exist only on the big screen, the Pentagon is building technology that could one day make them reality. DARPA is selecting a team to develop a neural interface that would both allow troops to connect to military systems using their brainwaves and let those systems transmit back information directly to users' brains. The Next Generation Non-Surgical Neurotechnology, or N3 program, aims to combine the speed and processing powers of computers with the human's ability to adapt to complex situations, DARPA said. In other words, the technology would let people control, feel, and interact with a remote machine as though it was part of their own body. For the first time, a human carved a rock into a blade. From the first time a human carved a rock into a blade or formed a spear, humans have been creating tools to help them interact with the world around them, said Al Imondi, the program manager at DARPA's Biological Technologies Office. The tools we use have grown more sophisticated over time, but these still require some form of physical control interface, touch, motion, or voice. What a neural interface promises is a richer, more powerful, and more natural experience in which our brains effectively become the tool. I mean, this is a fairly long article on the effectiveness, but there's an interesting component to it. In particular, the N3 program is divided into two tracks: non-invasive interfaces that sit completely outside the body, and minutely invasive interfaces that could require users to ingest different chemical compounds to help external sensors read their brain activity. In both tracks, technologies must be, quote, bidirectional, meaning they can read brain activity and also write new information back to the user. Now, this is important. That concept of bidirectional communication within technology connected directly to the brain, that is something that can be abused. That is risk. That is something where you could feed an order into the brain or into the body, bypassing conscious effort, and actually tell the body to shoot somebody and override the soldier's judgment just directly.
Yeah.
Now, that kind of concept is basically murder by remote. And there is, as far as I'm concerned, there's no real justification for it whatsoever. And
Yeah.
on top of that, there's one more piece I got, which is out of the Edmonton Sun. But I'd like to get your views on what DARPA is trying to do first.
Oh, well, I mean, of course they would. And not to mention the fact that, like, if you can remotely control somebody and you've got the technology to do it and it's remotely portable, fucking of course you're going to want it if you're in the long-term business of destabilizing regions so that you can go in there and make money off of the chaos. I mean, if you want to destabilize a region, control a religious fundamentalist to make him think Allah will smile on him if he fucking does what you want. If you want, a bigger conspiratorial element here, just park a van outside a local mullah's house and have him order people to do certain things, or certain fucking cluster of religious leaders could all suddenly agree on the same idea. It's obvious how this could be used. Like, I just, there's no reason to assume that it wouldn't be something that they would be looking into. It'd be so much easier to control people that way.
Yeah. I mean, and here's another person claiming the voices made me do it. It's mind control. Voices made me kill Tinder date, accused says. This is out of, as I said, the Edmonton Sun, and it's from the Associated Press.
Oh, and just to preface, by the way, in case the person who is craven enough to just downvote and unsubscribe without telling us why, in case the reason you're doing that is because you think that we're just like saying that this explains all mental illness, this could just be schizophrenia. And I'm not denying that it is, and I don't think like that's a possibility, and I don't think Lupin it is either. This
No.
also could just be somebody fucking lying to try and make their story sound more sympathetic. We are just saying what we think might be because of the information that came out. We're not saying we endorse any specific idea. Although, as a conspiracy theorist, I looked into enough of this to consider it very strongly, much more strongly than your average commoner who would just accept the mainstream media lies. But you know what? If you're here for Bad Morning News, and you're here for my normal bullshit, and you know that this channel is not for people who don't think along those lines. So if you also don't think along those lines, then I'd appreciate it if you could fuck off too, because we don't need trolls in the comments saying, well, you guys are just peddling trash. Well, yeah, maybe, but we're peddling trash better than the MSM's garbage at the very least. So fuck you.
From my point of view, I just would like them actually to give me a valid argument. That's all I want. That's all I ask. If you got a problem with anything I'm saying, give me a valid argument. I'm just proposing one possible, plausible way that this could be done. And these are things that people
hugely important, by the way. Just saying.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's probable. The probability probably still lies with schizophrenia in a lot of cases. But in some specific cases, particularly ones where unusual activity coincides with it, for example, in Parkland, with the FBI not engaging, with the police being told not to engage by the higher-ups within the department during the event, those types of incongruities have to be taken into consideration. And you need, ideally, an explanation that explains all of them. Now, negligence is perfectly plausible in that situation, but negligence combined with voices in the head, combined with the other types of activity that this poor boy went through.
Well, psychoacoustics were the voices in the head, but there's also EMF signatures that can be shot into certain brain areas. There's also ELF, which can be shot into certain sections of the brain, and all parts of the body because it's electromagnetic. And there's also microwave radiation, which is just fucked up in general, which is why they have a big ass metal shield across the front of your microwave so you don't get cancer like in the olden days, you know. But like, even if, okay, so just as a preface to whatever you're about to say, we've got like a really simple example of mass mind control anyway, where and like the link to the article will be in the description, but there's a picture that went around for an ad that had a plane aimed at a tower, and it said, sticking one's nose where it doesn't belong. As the Arabic saying goes, he who interferes with what doesn't concern him finds what doesn't please him. And there's a plane pointed at a tower, and this is an official image fucking from Saudi Arabia. And the article says, as Canada stands up to them, Saudi Arabia threatens to fly a plane into Toronto Tower, just like 9/11. After Canada asked Saudi Arabia to release the imprisoned human rights activists, a Saudi group posted a photo of a plane about to hit Toronto's CN Tower, just like 9/11. Canada is doing something that the United States has never been able to do, and that is standing up to Saudi Arabia. And as a result of standing up to the tyrannical Saudi Arabian government, Canadians were issued a dire threat suggesting a new 9/11 style attack on their own soil. The incident began blah, 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 blah. And then adding to the ominous nature of the dispute, shortly after the row began to worsen, a Saudi Arabian organization tweeted a digitally altered image that depicted a plane flying toward Toronto's CN Tower in an obvious reference to 9/11. The image was tweeted with the following caption: "Sticking one's nose where it doesn't belong," with another saying below: "He who interferes with what doesn't concern him finds what doesn't please him." The image was retweeted hundreds of times as Twitter blew up at the government-funded group infographic KSA Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for tweeting such an ominous threat. Before being scrubbed from the internet, the group issued an apology and attempted to claim that the picture of a plane aimed directly at the CN Tower, accompanied by a threat, was meant to portray the ambassador returning home. However, the internet is not buying it.
No, of course not.
The Saudi Ministry of Media shut down the Instagram and Twitter accounts, claiming they're investigating the group because of the complaints. So there are ways that you can subtly influence people to be afraid, to be cognizant of certain specific ideas, even if you don't have these weapons, and then add these weapons to the possible mix, and you got a big old pile of shit that you can eat.
So yeah, let's hit this purported victim of directed energy weapons. New York man accused of killing a New York City woman he met on a dating app says voices in his head made him do it. Daniel Drayton spoke to a reporter with New York's Daily News who visited him at a Los Angeles jail. In an interview published today, Drayton says he remembered strangling Queen's nurse Samantha Stewart 2 weeks ago and talked about voices urging him to harm people. "I really liked her. I didn't want to kill her," he said from behind a glass partition. "They told me she had to die." Drayton was arrested last week in Los Angeles after police said he sexually assaulted a different woman, tried to strangle her, and refused to leave her apartment. He has pleaded not guilty. Drayton told Daily News he also remembers choking that woman. 2 law enforcement officials previously told the Associated Press after his arrest, Drayton claimed that he killed at least 5 women in Connecticut and New York. The officials were not authorized to discuss the investigation publicly and spoke to AP on condition of anonymity. Investigators are trying to verify his stories. Drayton told Daily News that he and Stewart visited a racetrack and shared an artichoke pizza, and he had no intentions of hurting her. "I'm a passenger in my own body," Drayton said repeatedly. "It is mind control," he said. "They use directed energy weapons on me to control my mind." Drayton said he strangled Stewart and tried to resuscitate her, but eventually her body went, quote, stiff. He used bleach to partly clean up the crime scene, but intentionally left his Egyptian cologne behind in the hope police could link it to him. "I wanted to get caught. I took some of her things with me and used them. I kept my same phone. I knew they could track it. I didn't know how long they would take," he said. Drayton said Tuesday he also recalled choking an ex-girlfriend in a park in Inwood on Long Island. That woman, Zina Barney, told Daily News this week that Drayton seemed like a cool guy initially, but when she broke up with him, he tried to strangle her until bystanders intervened. The next day, he threatened her and her to kill her and her family, she said. After buying a one-way ticket to California using Stewart's credit card, Drayton landed in Los Angeles and met a woman while taking an Uber ride, he said. They went back to the woman's apartment where he choked her. He recalled seeing her body wedged between the toilet and the wall, thinking that she was dead, but then she stirred. Drayton then said he attempted suicide with Advil before police caught up with him. He told Daily News he couldn't remember meeting a 23-year-old woman he was accused of raping in Brooklyn. But he also said the voices causes him to have blackouts. "They make it so I can't remember," he said. And that's the end of the article. But
yeah, I mean, because those are all classic symptoms of schizophrenia. Of various strains of it. So again, we're not saying this is what that is, but it's possible. That's all we're saying.
True. In this particular case, I doubt significantly that it is, but it is always a possibility.
So, I guess that's pretty close to wrapping it up for today, and I don't want to go massively over like we did yesterday, But yeah, we have support in the Twitter chat regarding fucking the lost subscriber and downvote and all that. We also have a comment in Discord, so why don't you keep this going a little bit while I string this and try to decipher what's being said.
Fair enough. So, I mean, it's a quick theory that one can use on Parkland, for example. This is why it's a bit more compelling to think this might actually be some type of, I don't want to say false flag, but covert action. Let's put it that way. You target a teenager who is troubled, who has a history of violence and antisocial behavior within a community. You create you basically find somebody who fits a certain set of terms, either no or little family, low or few friends, someone who is fairly malleable, someone who has not really had the chance to be taught or think for himself and acts out quite regularly. Target that person with a number of technologies that are being developed or have been developed in order to attempt these things. For those types of people, it's going to be more effective than somebody who is more cognizant and more capable of thinking critically, because they will recognize that, why did I think that? And then dismiss it in most cases. Whereas somebody who hears the same voice telling him to do certain things will consider that voice to be a form of imaginary friend and will treat that incident as being something real to him. Now, whether it is or not begs the question, but the fact of all of the tangential information, the lack of response from police forces, the lack of response from the FBI, one of those on its own would have been an anomaly. It would have been an indication of just schizophrenia. Two is a coincidence. So again, still an indication of schizophrenia. The three together, that becomes a bit more of, to in effect, a pattern. It's as if they didn't want to know, or they didn't want to deal with it. And then that begs the question, why? And those are the types of questions that you have to ask to try and work out what is actually going on with anything. You have to question things deeply. You can't just accept that what is being told is necessarily truth unless they have evidence backing it up. What evidence we've seen here is that mass negligence occurred on the part of multiple police agencies, and as a result, many people died over a preventable tragedy. One that seems to have been done by potentially a schizophrenic or somebody actually affected by covert operations.
Yeah. So, one moment. So, we had a comment in chat, in the Discord chat, that wanted a clarification on a comment I made yesterday. And I'm happy to give that clarification here. And the comment was that I said that voluntarism as a movement, sort of like feminism as a movement, is defined by the fact that most of them are cunts these days who don't want equal rights, just increased privileges. I might have misspoken, and I might have been talking about something else, but if I didn't, I was probably referencing the fact that, I'm just going to read what I wrote in chat. I said I probably misspoke, to be honest, but I don't remember the context of that 100%. If so, I think what I meant is that a lot of people who call themselves voluntarists aren't. Hoppian helicopter voluntarists, for one. Plus, many of them always dismiss communism, even anarcho-communism, and the visible herd mentality makes a lot of them look like cunts to me, which is probably what I meant. The guy who's responding says, communism is great if the participants involved are involved voluntarily. And I agree. As long as it's voluntary, that's what I'm here for, which makes me, a voluntarist in spirit. But in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish, the label voluntarist almost always rides on the right. And I'm not going to define myself by something that rides on the right, when I could much more easily just say that I'm an anarchist and I'm here for anarchy. I'm here to oppose the state, because it's an evil institution planning evil things for evil people to make evil amounts of money off of it, and evil, property accumulation with evil, like tracing it down the lineage, preservation of property lines through bloodlines and inheritance. So, yeah, I mean, maybe I wasn't miscommunicating, but maybe I was. I mean, I don't. He's showing me one paragraph. He's not showing me the bulk of what was said. So it'd be interesting to see what the context of that was. I'm going to be asking him for a timestamp shortly. But that's generally what I think I probably meant if I was being genuine. Because first off, I was extremely tired yesterday, and I'm still extremely tired today, but at least the caffeine kicked in faster. And probably what I was meaning was that if I did say that in that context and nothing was out of place because I was fucking tired, if I did say that, it was probably related to the general vibe that somebody can get, because I did say is defined as, I didn't say is always, and factually cunts. So I think that the average person, if they've been in interactions with your common group of voluntarists online, have probably just been beaten the fuck up by the comments. Nobody was really interested in conveying ideas. Nobody was interested in making a good case. They were all just interested in feeling and seeming right. And in a lot of cases, that can put a lot of people off because they want to think that what they think is valid. And, cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias means that if you want to get these sorts of people on board, you have to, you have to acknowledge their pain first before causing more of it, because cognitive dissonance engages the same centers of the brain as pain does. So maybe just being a little bit more sensitive to the average person would be a better choice. And, that would certainly make me think less of them were cunts, especially since a lot of them claim that the only sort of anarchism that's possible is right anarchism, and that puts a lot of other people off, and certainly doesn't make voluntarism look like anything more than a far-right philosophy of cunts.
Well, I'll be honest, I do disagree, but then again, I am a voluntarist. And I am ANCAP, but that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to put that aside while we're trying to get rid of the state. And I do believe most voluntarists feel that way. That doesn't mean we agree with communism, simply because we don't see it being logical. We see it being full of cognitive dissonance. And highlighting that cognitive dissonance does cause pain, but it often needs to be done.
And it's not like I quote agree or disagree with communism either. Like that's a binary I won't accept. I do think that like communism has flaws, mostly in its long-term stability and ability to plan for shocks without a central management agency. That's the reason why a lot of communist societies have been statist historically, most of them. But at the same time, I do agree with a lot of basic precepts that are brought up by communist thinkers. And I think that thinking that you can't agree with communist thinkers, because that would be agreeing with communism, is sort of a package deal that I won't accept. I'm not going to accept somebody's cargo cult.
Oh, no. I'm not saying that just because somebody is a communist, they can't have a good idea. That'd be silly.
Well,
but
right, but you
it's
just said you don't agree with communism, which generally means that you don't agree with the whole of the ideas. So,
I don't. My main problem with it is when its core is collectivism, and I can't
well,
conceptualize
ethical
a way.
collectivism, yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
can't, well, ethical or non, I don't care. It's basically when okay, when the ethics is core around collectivism, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't seem to
Well,
be a valid
right.
philosophy. It is then immediately hindered by its cognitive dissonance. But I have yet to see how it can be implemented without that in an
Well, I
effect.
mean,
But then again, I don't research it that heavily beyond what I've already done, because what I've done so far and who I've talked to so far, I haven't found somebody who can explain it in terms that we can agree to, because it always descends to capitalism is bad, communism is bad, communism's never been tried set of arguments. And it's frustrating when that's all I get to encounter.
well, the guy who brought all this up says, I think there's plenty of room for anarcho-communists to do what they do, and for anarcho-capitalists to do what they do. They probably should just live in different areas. I could
Yeah.
agree to that, although I do think that there's room for the idea of node societies, where there are specific elements of societies existing in nodes and basically operating next to each other for the most like optimization. Like if a communist society wanted the assistance of a capitalist society in terms of the ability to trade certain goods out from that society in exchange for certain other things like pharmaceuticals, etc., that would be fine. Um,
Mhm.
like China, he says like China mainland versus, then I think he's going to say Hong Kong. Um, yeah, if what you're saying is versus Hong Kong, then yes, yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
But so I think that there's a lot of room for pluralism and for duality and things.
Well, so do
Um,
I. I'm not saying that there's only one solution for everybody. I do think that there is one objective reality, and one solution is optimal. But if you don't like that solution, I'm not going to force it on you.
well, and also, of course, we're talking about one solution optimization for like, the paradigm we're in. When we finally start to figure out, well, when scientists finally start to figure out how to better control and use energy, it's going to get insane in this bitch.
Mm.
Because, like, we're talking about people who are fundamentally learning how to change one form of matter into another and how matter interacts with each other when, like, fundamentally shattered in the form of the Large Hadron Collider.
Mm.
And doing so, they're finding out a lot more about a lot of things, like ghost particles that fundamentally create universes, like fucking quantum particles that are in two states simultaneously at the same time. And that's just in terms of
Entanglement
binary.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
And
the
in
concepts of entanglement have been proven. The concept of the Higgs boson's been proven. We now have a full understanding of how matter acquires mass. We have a much better understanding of how space actually works. It's no longer a void. It's now basically a soup of fields that mix together and fluctuate, and that's why the universe is the way it is. It's all quite amazing how quickly
right,
things have come forward.
right,
And what's equally amazing is how upgrading that tool didn't make it discover anything else in particular
well,
of note.
but like, on that level, we've got a huge amount of possibilities for better systems. That's what
True.
I'm saying. Like, there's always the possibility that we'll find out tomorrow that capitalism is not the optimal state, and in fact we might even find that out from hearing from the right communist thought. But at the same time, I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not convinced yet. So I'm not quite done being a capitalist.
Mm.
I'm just open to the possibility that I'm not using my energy optimally. Even in a freedom context, there might be a better way to use energy that has not
Very
yet been
true.
discovered. So that's all I was saying. Like, in terms of communism versus capitalism, I think it's mostly perspective, and I think that largely I don't care how it turns out, as long as it turns out with an arrangement that did not like forcibly intrude on somebody, that didn't intrude on their boundaries, that didn't agree against themselves. So I would say essentially, I agree that I don't think communism is very feasible. I think I disagree on the reasons communism isn't feasible, and I think we've had that conversation before. But I do think that the idea of voluntarism has been tainted by a huge amount of people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, like the people who quote Hoppe because they like physical removal, or Mises because they like his "I don't like socialism" thing, but have neither read Democracy, the God That Failed, which is Hoppe's pretty much magnum opus, nor have they read Socialism, which is Mises's magnum opus, and they haven't read any of these to figure out why they believe what they believe. They just like citing them to sound smart. And that's like what a lot of voluntarists do. And so if I did call them cunts, it's probably for something like that, for people who don't actually know what the fuck they're talking about, but still want to sound like they do so that they can seem credible. If it, you know, and also so that they can seem credible to themselves while they feel like they owned the libs, when in fact they just made voluntarism look like a cult.
This is
so
part of the reason why I rarely ever cite anybody when it comes to my ideas, because as far as I'm concerned, if they influenced them, bully, but it wasn't just them. It was everything else that came along with them as well, in combination with that new piece of data added to my model. It's that principle that makes me think, okay, if this is true, then we need to refigure this. If it isn't true, work out why. And it's easy to do that if you use logic.
yeah, well, and he says I just like the general notion of the NAP. And I'm about to, well, you know, fuck it, because we're talking right now anyway. It's like practically a conversation now anyway. But he says he just likes the general notion of the NAP. Well, the NAP in concept has existed since the days of Locke. So I'm not exactly sure that the NAP is something you could ascribe to voluntarism, which as a word is just a fucking addition to the word voluntarism, which still didn't exist until like the 1800s. So like we're talking about a concept that has existed for a long time, and I don't think that consigning it to one or the other in terms of like voluntarism versus non-voluntarism is the right modus here. That's my point. Like, you can support the NAP while not being a quote voluntarist, because a voluntarist is a very specific sort of NAP supporter. They don't go hand in hand. And in fact, Austin Peterson, fucking cunt ass he is, calls himself a voluntarist, calls himself a libertarian, and then also says that he doesn't support the NAP and calls it an ANCAP suicide pact. So I fucking
Yeah.
it's really obvious that the label voluntarist has been tainted. And you know, if it's not obvious by even that example alone, and the fact that everybody acts like a fucking frat party or a football thing, because of like Austin Peterson's general vibe, I don't know how much clearer it needs to be that libertarianism and voluntarism looks like a huge pack of cunts. But
Well,
you know, that's my
okay.
personal bias.
Okay, your bias is your bias. From my view, I get kind of what you mean. There are libertarians who are ANCAP. It seems like you've sort of taken voluntarists and done what has been done to the term libertarian by mainstream media, just from assessment. Because the mainstream media treats libertarian now to mean anything to the right of the GOP,
Well, except
or
that I'm not
anything
doing
less
that.
authoritarian than the GOP. I know you're not doing that, but it includes the Hoppians, the minarchists, the Bordatarians, and the ANCAPs. They're just like, oh, those are I'd say, the four main factions of libertarianism as they stand today. people who do it, who believe in everything to do with the NAP until you get to the borders argument, and then they have a problem. People who believe we just need a little state, a little bit of Kansas fine. The ones who think that it should be, like me, no state equals the best state. And then those who are really actually conservatives, but like thinking that they understand libertarianism because it's pro-guns, pro-weed, pro this, that, and the other. They're the party lovers rather than anything else. Some of them even verge over into the minicus territory. But there are four major camps of libertarian, and they do sort of coincide with the four that you described for voluntarism.
Yeah, well, I mean, because the thing is, a lot of these people call themselves that anyway, because they have imprecise terms. Sort of like a communist calling themselves a communist instead of a socialist, when in fact they want democratic socialism and not communism. There are plenty of examples, or a Christian calling themselves a Christian when they're not Christian. Like we're talking about it in the chat. Patient Zero in the chat here says, like Ron Paul had this Tea Party, then it got hijacked by neocons. And I said he got booed from the Golden Rule. And the patient's like, yeah, that's sad. My response to that was, oh no, he's applying the Bible to foreign policy. Kill him, give us Barabbas. There are plenty of examples of hijacked movements, and I think that it's, the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing of its existence, and the first step in solving a problem is knowing it's there. And in this case, that problem is that the majority of the people who call themselves voluntarists are cunts. I mean, if that's what I was meaning yesterday, instead of just like misspeaking, because I think that might have been the case, but I still stand by the words.
Well, just be aware you're tarring me with that brush, right? I'm welcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said the majority. You could be the minority, and that might be the reason why you're one of the few people willing to co-host this with me.
I'm just a very easygoing kind of guy, that's all.
Whereas I'm not.
He has very strict views on how things should be, but I'm still easygoing.
Yeah. Well, and I think a good way to end this show would be to remind everybody who's president by, talking about a recent quote. Tiny children are not horses, Donald Trump says. So everybody remember that. Tiny children are not horses. Smash the state. Fuck the system.
Have a bad morning, everybody.
Bad morning, everybody.